My lady, I appear for the 8th respondent in this matter. The 8th respondent has been left out of these proceedings, while full knowing that the 8th respondent has a substantial material interest in the outcome of this matter. Because the 8th respondent was part and parcel of the entire consultation process. Now, my lady would have, if the 8th respondent didn't made an application to be joined in this matter, my lady would have ordered, because they were part and parcel of the process, and because they had an interest in the outcome of this matter. Why they were not cited, we will submit. Probably it's not an omission by mistake, but it was intentionally done because, and my lady, and I'll stick it up just now, my lady, why we made that submission. Because it goes to the heart of the issue how this second applicant have dealt with the consultation process to date. My lady, the 8th respondent is in front of this court as a collective of different houses, different councils. The councils of the Koronekwa, the council of the Horakwa, and excuse me for the pronunciation thereof, Kohakwakwa, the Korona, the Hrikwa royal houses, the Sand royal houses, and the likes. The second applicant stands here on his own. It's one council. And the 8th respondent has been relegated just to a small group of people. Not so. They represent councils. And in front of this court, in the second applicant, it's one council. My lady, I intended to address my lady and make submissions on a number of issues. One of them was whether the applicants were entitled to an interim order. That has been well traversed. I will not even deal with it. The second issue that was extremely well covered as well, my lady, was the issue on participation. And I'll probably just deal with it by referring my lady to one or two additional points in this regard.
Can you clarify is it paragraph 78, if my memory serves me correctly? Those who opposed the long list, or maybe I should refer to it as the long list of various houses, did they participate or did they not participate? Did they just withdraw from the process, not participate, and just express their view that we're opposing? Or in which manner did they participate?
The councils that I've just listed were represented in the First Nation collective.
I need you to elaborate more. I need you to elaborate more. What would the total council component be? Say, and out of the total component of councils, how many participated actively in the process?
Yeah. And I will deal with it, my lady. I'm just giving a brief outline at this stage, just on the issues that I want to deal with. And I want to make the distinction between the participation, which is by and large a process issue, and consultation.
Yes.
And I will deal with that as well. And then I'll try to deal with the issue that my lady has raised all the time, is the issue of risk. What will happen if the project is stopped or not? And I'll try to deal with that as well. Now, my lady, I want to take, my lady, that has already been done, to 741, page 741 of Mr. Jenkins's supporting affidavit.
But I'm not interested in the second applicant at all. I'm interested in other councils and other groups.
And I will deal with it, my lady. To the extent that this participation, my lady, was even well received by Heritage Western Cape. And they, Heritage Western Cape, at Annexure LL10, which is at page 150 of Volume 1, even under the E, which is under 38.3E, which deals with the result of consultation, says the following. It says, Heritage Western Cape acknowledges that in terms of the provisions of the PAJA, insofar as a formal notice and a commenting procedure is concerned, that the report complies with this section. So even in terms of PAJA, according to Heritage Western Cape, there's compliance.
Sorry, I just missed you. Where are you now reading from?
Comments and says that even in terms of the process, that notices and the participation, there's compliance in terms of PAJA. So, they then further on there, the third paragraph under E says the following: as previously noted, the DT and PW itself has entered into a stakeholder engagement with First Nation communities, as it has recognized that the baseline study has first tabled at the ICAM on 12 April 2017 was deficient in this regard, and it now seeks to rectify this. And we know that that has happened. So in terms of the accessibility to the process, the transparency to the process, participation, effective participation did take place.
What you see the last sentence under E, what does that mean? I don't understand that. Under E, the last line.
That last line, my lady, was probably in the context of the entire Trop site development relative to the River Club site development at the end. And
is that a negative statement that HWC is making here? Is it a negative statement?
It is. It is, my lady, but to what extent does it detract from the fact that there was participation? It doesn't. So, I want to outrightly as well, my lady, emphasize and echo the submissions that were made by my learned colleagues as well, that there was no precondition at all set for the second applicant at all to be part of the First Nation collective. In the beginning of the process, my lady, they were part of the First Nation collective. They then opted out of this process, voluntarily opted out of the process to be part of the collective. May I make the further submission, my lady? they are more than welcome to be also part of the process tomorrow, because they're not excluded from the process.
So they participated up to a certain point and thereafter withdrew.
They participated throughout the process.
Oh, I see.
But they dissociated themselves with the First Nation collective because the First Nation collective had decided to support the process and to support the development. And they were against it. My lady, let me then deal with the question of consultation. Now, and if I see the issues that my lady is grappling with, under consultation is the issue whether that consultation was real consultation, meaningful consultation, that result in a tangible outcome, and not just a pretense of a consultation. My lady, our submissions is, indeed, it was a meaningful consultation. And I will demonstrate, my lady, as to why we say it was a meaningful consultation. So not only were the First Nations collective given an opportunity for their voices to be heard, but they had an opportunity to negotiate a settlement, negotiate something tangible out of this process. One of them is the right to return to the land, which is a very important aspect.
Which would encompass what? How do they return?
And that right of return to the land, my lady, is to be physically present on the land. And I will deal with it now by taking my lady through as to the benefits that will be manifested by returning to the land. But what I want to demonstrate to my lady is that even if we look at the Hart and Townsend HIA report at page 183, where the second applicant made certain recommendations. It starts off, my lady, and says that the Horonai Kona have made a number of
You're on
recommendations.
page
At 183, my lady.
183, thank you.
Where it says the Horonai Kona have made a number of recommendations, which we include here as an articulation of the view of the site as heritage. Then it lists the number of recommendations that has been made. And if we go then on to page 184 as well, my lady, and I will then also show my lady that these recommendations were then also incorporated in the design of the project, as just recently articulated by my learned friend for the city. So,
It's a long list of recommendations. Were all of them accepted? I see there's reference to excavations.
Not all of them were accepted,
No.
my lady, but especially the ones that are specifically related to the heritage elements were incorporated. My lady, then further on, at page 229 is an indication that those contributions have been considered, those recommendations have been taken into consideration.
So there is no suggestion that the property should be expropriated.
Not at all. as one of the recommendations. Now, the meaningfulness of the contribution that was made is recognized even by the second applicant in his founding affidavit. And if we go back to volume 2 at 738, the developer has also entered into a social compact agreement with the First Nations collective, in which the developer commits to ensuring that members of the First Nations collective benefit from the procurement processes during the construction of the development. Then he goes further and he says, the social compact with the First Nation will also involve, then he lists those recommendations that he also previously made, which is now part and parcel of the process. Now, these are entailed in a binding agreement, which has now been signed between the First Nation collective and the developer. And these benefits are not just, they are benefits where the First Nation can find an enclave into the future. So it's not just during the construction process, it's not only during the completion of, but it will continue in time memorial. So that's the strength to which the First Nation collective have negotiated the settlement. And that's the extent of the depth and the intense nature of the consultation, the meaningfulness of the consultation that have taken place. So it has a concrete outcome.
What is the answer to my question? How many councils are there in total, and how many councils were against the project, and how many councils were opposed? Do we have the numbers or not?
My lady, the councils could be found at volume 6, starting at the founding affidavit of, starting at page 2527.
I don't want to just talk about the First Nations collective anymore. I'm interested in individual councils, based on what I saw in paragraph 78 that was referred to earlier. So, yeah, here's 7.4, I see here.
Yeah, so my lady, firstly, what's represented here is 6 councils already. And as I said in the beginning, my lady, in front of this court is only one council.
The FNC consists of 6 councils.
Indeed.
Excluding the second.
Excluding the second, my lady. So, then, my lady, if one goes then further on that founding affidavit, answering affidavit, my lady, starting at page 26, from page 25 to page 26, there an indication is given that the status of some of the organizations that the second applicant is referring to.
Is there an answer to my question, and must I tell you why I'm asking the question? Mr. Arendse completed the first report, And thereafter, he was mandated to complete the second report with regard to intangible heritage value of the property. So you're dealing with the same person who consulted them initially. And the first report already expressed a view of the First Nations collective. So the second report was not concerned with whether there was opposition or what the position was. In other words, I think putting it in a negative manner, I would say that the developer knew of the contents of Mr. Arendse's first report, so the developer could then assess from that report that there appears to be consensus by a certain group within the First Nation groupings. Then Mr. Arendse was then mandated to complete the second report. So the court does not have the advantage of a report emanating from someone else other than Mr. Arendse. So the court is not 100% comfortable to just rely on that specific report. It's been criticized by the applicants, and the court is trying to find objective evidence of the participation process and accuracy in respect of who was included and who not. Perhaps the onus is on the applicant to do that because they raised the issue. They're not happy with Mr. Arendse's report. But it serves no purpose just to tell the court that the First Nations Collective agreed to the proposals. The First Nation Collective comprises 6 councils and they entered into a social compact with the developer. That is not sufficient. I need to know who did not participate in this process. With specific reference to paragraph 7.3 and further that the court was referred to earlier.
My lady, probably the manner in which to answer that question is to say that even the ones that participated in the process that have objected to the development, those views have been considered. The ones that were not there, my lady.
But then you need to allay the court's concerns, the court's fears. I need to know why is it that the court is not provided with the numbers now? I need to know, perhaps the court should ask for a note on that. Who was included, who was not included, who agreed to the... I don't also want to complicate the issue because for me it's a simple question. How many councils are there in total that have an interest in this matter? How many participated? How many were excluded? And who voluntarily were excluded themselves? But the second respondent is a party who actually participated, so I'm not really that much interested in the second respondent's position at this stage. I'm interested in the position of groupings within the First Nations who were possibly excluded. That is all the court is interested in. So I don't think it's a complicated question, but the court is struggling to find an answer to the question.
My lady, in terms, if my lady will be so pleased, we'll try them to submit a note in that regard.
Yes.
But as I said, the real question for these purposes, in this application, for an interdict, will not assist the court to a great extent.
But isn't
the
it
real
important, for purposes of public participation, the court must be alive to the fact that there exists X amount of councils, and this is the amount of councils who participated, and the remaining councils then arrived at a decision and then entered into the social compact with the developer.
Or, my lady, it is whether the process was well known, publicized, invited people to comment, and people had the choice and option whether they want to participate in the process or not. And
well,
the ones
that's a good point you're raising.
Yeah.
So you have an idea what the court is looking for, yes?
And we might not even be in a position to accurately give the court that information.
We
But,
are
that's-
dealing with a vulnerable group in society, indigenous groupings. So we must just be careful when we exclude vulnerable groups, and that is what the court is trying to
Indeed,
establish.
indeed, so my lady, and hence I went back to Heritage Western Cape's
Yes.
comment
Yes.
in their comments on the HIA, where they recognize that in terms of the process for participation, that has been complied with. And that's a material element, my lady. So,
And the court should then be comforted by the view of the HWC, because for all intents and purposes they are not here, and they raised some concerns that they had. So they are not necessarily in favor of the contract, they're a neutral party, or yeah, I would say they did not participate, did not institute any action. So you are saying that the court should be satisfied if HWC says
that they are satisfied.
yeah,
Indeed, Somali.
Yes.
And their only concern was a division. But the division between the First Nation collective or the Khoi groupings themselves, my lady, those that were opposing the development's views were taken into consideration. So they were not discarded at all through the process. My lady,
Can you
No.
just pause one moment? So, are you saying that had there been any groupings who were dissatisfied, that HWC would have alerted the parties?
they would have indicated that. They would have indicated that indeed, and said there's a group of people here that were not part and parcel of the process. They
Or
did
a
not know-
majority grouping?
My lady,
I must express the court's concern. I'm trying to assist you by asking you decisive questions. Had there been a majority group within the First Nations that was excluded, HWC would have recorded it.
indeed. So, my lady then asked the issue of risk. What will happen if this project does not continue? The only way, my lady, I can put it is in the title of a book, A Dream Deferred. It will be a dream deferred for people sitting here in the gallery. 70-year-old people, 80-year-old people of the Khoi saint descendants that want to have the right of return to the land. It will mean the lost opportunities that was just articulated, even lost opportunities in the social compact agreement, which guarantees them a right in perpetuity. It guarantees them a right of return to the land. That will be the risk.
Would that be on the basis that they participate in commercial enterprises within the development? If you use the word return to the land, you are referring to participation in the commercial enterprises.
Indeed so, including the heritage aspect as well. So it's on both counts, my lady.
And what do we currently have there? No participation, no provision made for the protection and preservation, and to educate the general public about
Indeed so, my lady.
the First Nation.
Indeed so, my lady. Those opportunities will be totally eroded.
I'd like to ask the eighth respondent, what is the position with regard to this golf course that was there? If this project didn't happen, what would would the status quo just have remained? Or is this a situation where a different type of development would have been more suitable?
My lady, in my head, we alluded to the binary option, or to what is internationally also recognized as options where a site like that could either be preserved
Yes?
or restored. Now, there are specific instruments in terms of the National Heritage Act, specific sections, where you deal with preservation of a building, the restorations of buildings. What the eighth respondent is advocating is also a consideration of reconstruction.
Why did the applicant refer to throwing concrete in the Lisbik River? Because my initial understanding was that the river was going to be rehabilitated. So when you see the word rehabilitated, you attach a positive connotation to what is anticipated. But the applicants appear to attach a negative connotation to that. So I'd like to know what is the eighth respondent's view on the statement that concrete is going to be thrown into the river. We know the position with regard to the land that was infilled, the history, etc. Can the eighth respondent just allay the court's fears with regard to what is going to happen to the Lisbek River? And probably Black River, the confluence of the rivers, which is a central feature in the debate.
My lady, I think the respondent for the city has in some way answered that question. And that
I'm trying to establish whether the eighth respondent is satisfied with what is anticipated, what is going to happen to the river, how it's going to be rehabilitated, the manner in which it's going to be done. Is the eighth respondent satisfied with that?
And hence, the eighth respondent is well aware and well alive of that, my lady. And for those reasons, they have assented to that. My lady, what I want, my lady, and that's the other question my lady is probably grappling with, and that is whether the issue of intangible heritage and will be preserved and be expressed on that premises. And my lady, I'm only this morning I looked at a practice note from ECOMOS, and that deals at least, and it gives at least some indication of how a person deals and how a person appreciates the relationship.
Sorry, I just missed you. Are you referring to one of the UN instruments?
It's specifically...
Yes, so I know what you're talking about. Yes, you may proceed.
Indeed so. Where it deals with the appreciation of the relationship between place and cultural practices. And may I read it? It says, not all cultural practices that occur at a place will have a significant connection to that place. And nor will every place be associated with cultural practices. So some cultural practices may not require a particular place, and some may simply occur in a convenient location for the community or group engaged in that practice. It's out of that perspective, my lady.
But we do have the observatory there. We do have the reference to the stars with regard to the traditions of the indigenous First Nation groups.
And for those reasons, my lady, in terms of the design specification, that has been taken into consideration. And hence the views to the Signal Hill and the views to some of the parts of the mountain have been so have been part of the design specification in order to make a provision for that. So, my lady, the expectations that for the First Nation collective, as negotiated, has been met, and therefore there was support for this project, my lady. My lady, as I said, that the question of whether this application must fail or succeed, we make the same submissions as the rest of my learned friends, including my lady, that we believe that this application must fail.
The eighth respondent says that the First Nations were adequately represented, they were adequately consulted with, and they were provided adequate opportunity to participate in the public participation process. Is that what the eighth respondent says?
Indeed so, my lady. And for those reasons, this application must fail with cost, my lady. As a court, please.
What does the eighth respondent don't rush to, you're not done yet. I'm just checking something. What does the eighth respondent say? Are the applicants not here because they are concerned about the preservation of the heritage, etc.? Would that not trigger constitutional issues in terms of costs?
My lady, I've addressed that in my heads of arguments as well, and I've addressed the submission in my heads of argument.
I'm looking now, yes, I'm trying to find that.
I've addressed that at page 27 and 28 in my heads of arguments as well, my lady. And I refer to the same cases, how...
Yes. Well, we're dealing with the First Nations collective,
yeah,
who has perhaps more understanding than any of us in terms of the issues that were at stake in this matter, or that the issues which are currently at stake as we speak, it's going on review, etc., etc. So the eighth respondent will appreciate what this matter is about. What are you saying on page 27 with regard to costs?
My ladies asked me a question on cost.
Yes.
And I said on page 27 and 28, I deal with the issue of
Yes.
cost. I deal with the two matters, the Boer Cup
I see.
Civic and Ratepayers Association matter, and I deal with a BioWatch Trust case as well, my lady. And I deal with it from a perspective that in this application for an interdict, no real constitutional rights issues have been raised.
Isn't heritage automatically, doesn't it become a constitutional issue? The issue of heritage, preservation of heritage?
Indeed so, my lady, but that issue, my lady, is an issue for the review application. For the interdict, my lady, it is the question of whether the applicants will sustain harm. And that has not been well argued by the applicant in this matter, my lady.
Well, the
The case has not been put
Sorry?
forward.
Sorry, I interjected, yes? You say the applicant did not make out a case.
No,
for
they
this.
did not make out a case.
I note that in your heads. Will the eighth respondent please provide the court with a note with regard to the total amount of councils involved, or, with regard to the total amount of councils that exists within the First Nations groups, and how many participated in this process, and the extent of their participation.
I will indeed do so.
Thank you very much.
As a course, please. Letters from the Griqua Royal House. Letters from the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, which is the only structure that interacts with government.
Can you just repeat that?
The letter from the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa is the only traditional structure,
Yes.
recognized traditional structure, that interacts with government in relation to so my lady, further on, as I said, the others is also the Khoi Cultural Heritage Development Council. That's following from the National Khoi San Council. And the Institute for the Restoration of Aboriginal South Africans. The Foundation, Nation Restoration, and then the Cape Khoi San Labour Forum. So that's the vastness of the collective, the First Nation collective that support this project. And all of them resort under the Cape Khoi. And the second applicant is the only one of those councils.
So second applicant falls in the first category?
Falls within the first category. Is the only one
Yes.
of the councils that have opposed the development. But they participated in the
Yes.
process. And their voices were heard. Their recommendations were incorporated. If not all of them, but some of them.
6 councils, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But
And
you're still not answering my question. I'd like to know the total amount, the total number of councils within the Khoi and San groups. So you said the first group here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divisions in the first group. Is this an all-inclusive group? That is as indicated in the papers? Is it all-inclusive?
These are the known groups that are currently active and also groups that are currently participating in a lot of other traditional structures. Should there be tomorrow another group, my lady, then it could be probably a new formation. We don't know. It's probably an amorphous kind of
So is it safe to say that all interested groups were either consulted or informed about this?
It is safe to say that all affected groups,
I see.
firstly, have been informed about the development, given the opportunity to participate, and were consulted as well in the process, including the ones that have objected
Yes.
to the development.
Thank you.
As a court, please, my lady.